Playing Xena in the cult classic Xena Warrior Princess, a tortured, kick-ass woman with a sapphic soft spot for her BFF, may have been what catapulted Lucy Lawless onto the lesbian icon map, but it's not what kept her there. How did she do it? Let me explain.
How do you feel about being such a queer icon? People have put so much on their relationship.
I'm delighted. Again, it's about positive change and self-empowerment. So if it makes people feel seen, I think that's what happened with the gay community. They felt seen, especially for lesbians. People want to see themselves reflected on screen. Otherwise, they feel ignored, less than, and devalued.
The story is familiar to any Xena fan. It was the spin-off from Hercules: The Legendary Journeys after a 3-episode arc that got the producers excited. It quickly outstripped its sister show in popularity, and at its height was playing in 80 countries and beating out Baywatch and Star Trek for the most watched series. Xena, with her dark, guilt-ridden past, formidable fighting skills, and Amazonian stature, was quite the draw for audiences, and in particular for the sapphic ones. Though there have been notable, powerful female characters like Ripley in Alien, or Linda Carter's Superwoman, or Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, Xena was a whole new brand of campy kickassery. She was looking for redemption. She had agency. Her life was not lived in relation, nor required a man. She also crucially had a sidekick, called Gabrielle, that she loved more than life itself. The way Lucy tells it, the sapphic overtones were intended from the start.
I know that this initially wasn't intended, but this character became a lesbian icon, which was...
I actually think it was intended by the writers and producers. They knew what they were doing.
And perhaps they were. Rob Tappert, the executive producer, liked to push boundaries in his storytelling.
Rob, like I say, will look where the frontiers are of acceptability in television and start pushing back those.
Which can be seen with one of his other shows, Spartacus, which was essentially the precursor to Game of Thrones. But according to Liz Friedman, a producer and writer on the show, the studio were very worried about it, and I was the one saying, guys, no one's ever going to think they're gay. Because my now wife and then girlfriend and I would go to the supermarket, and I am a white Jew, and she is Creole, and it was clear that we were connected in some way, and they'd go, are you two sisters? It was bizarre to me that lesbians were so invisible in the real world, and I just assumed no one would ever think that of Xena and Gabrielle. But as we know, people did think Xena and Gabby were gay for each other, and once it became clear to Rob and Liz, they began to feed the flames more and more over the seasons, towing a fine line that allowed certain audiences to not even notice. Liz said in 1996, "That's one of the best parts of the job, getting to throw in references that I know the fans who are interested in that will pick up on, but don't necessarily flash any irrevocable red lights." Lucy and Renee O'Connor, who played Gabrielle, far from recoiling from what was being read into it, happily leaned in. As I talked about in my video, Xena and Gabrielle are married and other sapphic facts. And you may think, hold up, why would they recoil at viewers thinking Xena and Gabby were gay? Well, you have to understand that there was not much positive representation around. In fact, aside from maybe the recurring role of Ross's ex-wife and her partner on Friends and a small reoccurring role in Hill Street Blues in the late 80s, there was next to nothing in the mid-90s on TV, and it was understood that playing gay was more or less professional suicide. As we found out with how the straight actress Laura Dern, who played Ellen DeGeneres' love interest in the 1997 Coming Out episode, she didn't work for a year after that and needed a security detail for a time after. And Oprah Winfrey got death threats for being the therapist that helped Ellen realize that she liked women. That is quite besides how it was more or less the end of Ellen's acting career. But for Lucy, it was no big deal.
Village Voice did an article, Michael Musto, about this new feminist lesbian icon, and we were like, you're so crazy, and then it was like, okay, that's cool, that's new, that's, where it's at.
We just thought that was kind of amusing, and yeah, totally, let's do that, part of our naughty sense of humour.
And while it didn't seem like such a big deal to Lucy, it was a huge deal for the lesbian audience who were parched for any kind of positive story that reflected themselves.
I think Gabrielle gave Xena a home, and that relationship is one of the major draw cards for the audience, especially that very loyal, hardcore audience.
I think it is beautifully encapsulated in this excerpt from the 1997 interview with Lesbian News, an Australian queer magazine. I got this great lesbian fan letter that said how important our show was to her. It said, she stops, still incredulous at the content. This girl said, "It's so important that you're not afraid of us. Lucy pauses for a long time. Do you have any idea what that means? Any idea the kind of existence one must have to need to say that to me? And look, it's true. Having a straight, at the time hugely popular actress not be afraid of her lesbian fans was huge. Not only not afraid, but she seemed to like her lesbian fan base.
It also put me in touch with an amazing fan base who are very active in their own communities. And that was part of the Xena ethos, which was to be part of the greater good. It's not about serving yourself, but how do you enrich your community? What can you do within your sphere of influence? Their work has given meaning to my life.
Another big part of her enduring appeal was her willingness to play gay again, quite unconcerned about being typecast, far from trying to distance herself from the origins that made her like, say, David Duchovny with The X-Files or Harrison Ford with Star Wars. She accepted roles where she didn't play straight, and the sapphic ladies noticed. Her next major role after Xena was on the sci-fi hit Battlestar Galactica, a remake of the 70s cult show. While the gay part was almost glossed over, it consisted primarily of a couple of scenes that made clear that there'd been a three-way with Caprica and Gaius Baltar, two other major characters on the show, and I wonder how much Lucy's lesbian icon status influenced this writing decision. She made a cameo appearance on the L Word in the final season as a cop, which was a total nod to her sapphic fans, and while confirmation that her character was gay didn't make the final cut, there is a scene floating around that has her hitting on Helena Peabody. Then there is, of course, her turn in Spartacus, where she and her good friend Gaia, played by Jamie Murray, known for the Warehouse 13 subtext ship, do more than just lock lips. Her willingness to reprise queer roles multiple times has certainly always been appreciated, and she's always seemed like a surprised but willing LGBTQ icon.
I hate that kind of injustice against children. People are queer or straight or whatever they are from before the time they're born. So to be adjudicating them as less than from they're getting those messages implicitly or explicitly from such an early age, it's a terrible, it's a violence to me. It's violence against children, and that just goes throughout their lives. So we want to eradicate that, stop being violent to children and telling them that they don't belong. It's so upsetting.
Lucy's willingness to don the mantle thrust upon her was seeded from childhood. Lucy grew up with parents that were into public service. Her father was a mayor of Mount Albert, a suburb in Auckland, New Zealand, and her mother a school teacher who was active in the community. From a young age, she saw being involved in charity and community work as a natural extension of her career as an actress, and as such has worked extensively with Starship Children's Hospital in Auckland for decades, as well as Greenpeace New Zealand, where she was most famously arrested for being part of a sit-in on an oil drilling ship to prevent it from leaving harbour to search for oil off New Zealand's shoreline back in 2012.
Why has it been important for you to get involved in these kinds of issues and social movements?
Specifically, it's climate change that I'm involved in the fight against. I feel very brutally disappointed in my generation for not stepping up, for saying, oh, the kids will fix it. How dare we as parents? So if anything brings out the warrior in me, it is that. Yeah, it's about just honouring the life in all life on the planet. We all rise together.
She equally took on her role as an ally to the LGBTQ+ community with seeming ease and made efforts to go to Mardi Gras in Sydney a number of times to show her support. She's made it clear that she continues attending the Xena conventions because of the self-named hardcore nutballs who created community around her show.
Just bless you and thank you so much for your incredible loyalty and you support one another. So that's why I come here, is because of you guys.
These actions married well with her role as Xena. While claiming to be nothing like the role she played, she too went around helping others for the greater good, just like her character did throughout the series. She was, in a manner of speaking, exemplifying the very message of her show in her own life. And look, this sapphic lady thinks that is pretty darn neat. And I think others did too. Lucy has made multiple comments over the years about how the types of die-hard lesbian fans that it attracts seems to be people who also went out and did acts of service themselves, sometimes crediting the show for inspiring them to do so.
It gave people sort of messages of self-empowerment, and a lot of people took those messages out of the show and made some incredibly positive change in their own lives, for which they seem to credit the show and me, even though the magic was totally in them. They did it, and but I'm very happy to be associated with positive change.
Sometimes it's helpful to think that life is long. Everybody goes, life is short, life is short. No, life is long. You can change your mind. You don't have to decide now and stick with it forever. It doesn't have to be that way.
To me, Lucy's allyship is well displayed with how she changed her mind about one thing in particular. At the end of the show, the fans were deeply upset with the death of Xena. Initially, Lucy said that she was happy with how the show ended. She was in agreement with Rob Tappert that the death made sense as a way to close the loop on the redemption arc Xena had been on for the last 6 years. But she listened to her lesbian fans and she came to understand how the death of yet another sapphic lady was not satisfying, but in fact a complete betrayal.
I do regret that we cut Xena's head off. Because for all those people who loved the relationship and loved the characters, it meant the two were never going to live happily ever after. It meant that Gabrielle was going to roam the earth with this little bloody urn of ashes. It took away everything that we'd set up. And we just thought that was a really strong storyline and the heart story would continue. But no, it really pained our audience, the hardcore nutballs who are so loyal to us. I think it was a terrible thing to do to them, actually.
I would also be remiss if I didn't also draw a connection about Lucy Lawless's icon status ticking the same boxes that Cate Blanchett and Rachel Weisz did when I broke down what made them an icon. Like them, she starred in an unabashed love story between two women. She's played gay again since. She is a straight, attractive, white, middle-aged woman who at the time of the show was at the top of her game and, crucially, gave a damn about her sapphic community. Like Cate and Rachel, Lucy has that interplay of undeniable feminine sensuality combined with a certain masculine clarity with how she holds and expresses herself that seems quite simply to be seductive to the sapphic senses. And non-sapphic senses too, obviously, because the show has been enduringly popular with basically all demographics. Most importantly of all, she was the first to do these things when there was no one else, and for that she is and will remain the OG lesbian icon. Check out my playlist for other lesbian icons, and until next time, lady lovers.